First, let me introduce George Will. As always, Katrina vanden Heuvel, publisher of The Nation. Welcome back to Cokie Roberts, whose new book, Ladies of Liberty, comes out this week. You'll find it in bookstores Tuesday. And Republican strategist Senor. And George, I do want to get to the politics, but let's do a quick round on General Petraeus and Iraq. As I was listening to Senator Webb and Graham this morning, and maybe people will hear different things, it seemed to me as if the debate were simmering down and that the senators at least might be willing to go forward, to get through this round of hearings and let the presidential debate decide the bigger questions.
There was something like 34 votes in the Senate on Iraq last year, and the Republicans managed to stop the Democratic proposals wherever they were, but that won't suffice. I think, George, you may see a change in the debate now about financing. Ben Nelson, the conservative Democrat from Nebraska, has a bill that says, henceforth, no direct American appropriations for reconstruction in Iraq, only loans, the collateral of which would be the sea of oil on which Iraq sits.
So Iraq has to start paying its own way.
Exactly, and I think that that will create some interesting coalitions.
I think that what you're seeing is a certain hesitancy on the part of Democrats to just go after the war and the strategy and all of that, but...
Or General Petraeus himself.
Oh, absolutely, not General Petraeus. But much more of an effort to tie the bad economy here to the war effort, and to the degree that people are convinced that the war is draining resources that could be spent at home. That's where the Democrats think they have an opportunity.
Less hesitancy for Katrina.
Less hesitancy because I think against the backdrop of what we've seen in Iraq this past week, Petraeus will come in. It's clear that the premises of the surge have failed. It's a bankrupt policy. There is no national political reconciliation. Even General Petraeus has spoken to that. But I do think that it is the cost of war, the question of whether America, which it cannot afford to stay in Iraq for 10, for 100 years, and that the key question in this next period, which will be, how do we sensibly, responsibly withdraw from Iraq, because that is in our national security interest. And those who will talk about defeatism this coming week, it is realism. And I thought Webb was very smart about intensifying diplomacy and putting it in the context of a military which is stretched thin. If McCain's policies are followed to their end limit, his policies will destroy a military which people like Fallon and others have spoken to so eloquently.
So how does General Petraeus deal with this? He has called out the Iraqi government in the past, but he wants to convince the Congress the surge is working, and he needs them to back this pause.
Right. So basically what he will do is frame, in part, the consequences of withdrawal. And he has some support on that front, support from advisors to the Democratic presidential candidates. Systematically, these advisors to the Democratic presidential candidates are going to Iraq and coming back and saying things that are very different from what their bosses are saying. Colin Kahl from the Center for New American Security.
He's a Barack Obama advisor.
Barack Obama's Iraq advisor. He was at this think tank, this Democratic-leaning think tank, just returned from Iraq, and said we need 60,000 to 80,000 troops in Iraq well into the future. And for those political candidates and critics of the administration who argue that withdrawal from Iraq will put political pressure on the Iraqi government, completely misunderstand that you could have a civil war.
It is an important point, and that's why, listen, the nation has endorsed Obama critically, but we have also contested his framing of withdrawal.
But this is going to be a split in the party. You all are backing a plan that a lot of congressional challengers are backing, saying
that's right.
Immediate withdrawal,
there are 42 congressional challenges.
Candidates are saying that because they're sitting there saying, look, we've been there, we've seen it, we think it's an irresponsible thing to do.
It is not, but you know what? The responsible thing to do is withdraw. If we withdraw responsibly, the region will be more stable in the long term. America will be restored as a responsible global leader. And there are 42 challengers. You're absolutely right, Cokie, who have a responsible plan.
Convincing the electorate of that, I think, it would be very difficult. And I also agree that the notion that Senator McCain and Senator Graham, you heard this morning, putting forward, that Americans would prefer to win.
But what is win? This war is unwinnable. There are no military solutions. And Cokie, Americans are already behind. With 2/3 of Americans believe this war was a mistake to fight. And when Dick Cheney said to ABC's Martha Raddatz last week, I don't care what Americans think. The contempt, the disdain for Americans and for Americans and what this war has done to the military, to our economy, and to our future as a nation. If you care about responsible